It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every Wednesday night discussing topical issues, legal issues, and tonight it's a legal issue that's always topical.
Always, and usually infuriating to many laymen and some lawyers as well. But the subject tonight is going to be representing the unpopular client. You wonder about the lawyer that represented John Wilkes Booth, that represented John Hinckley, that represented Tim McVeigh or Terry Nichols. Well, we've got two of those four here tonight to visit with us, John Coyle and Brian Hermanson, who were both involved in representing two of the charged people in the Oklahoma City bombing case. We're going to talk about representing an unpopular client, what it does for society, what it does to and for the lawyer involved, and other aspects. I think you will find this a very interesting show tonight.
Two interesting gentlemen. That show starts right after this timeout. This is The Verdict.
Notice is hereby given. Ada Nissan is overstocked with new 2005 Nissans. This inventory must be eliminated immediately. The marketing firm of Hamlin, Novel, and Reeves will conduct an inventory elimination event. Over $1.2 million in pre-owned cars, trucks, and vans will be sold off. Special elimination prices will be in effect. No negotiation necessary. This elimination event will be held at Ada Nissan, located at 420 Lonnie Abbott in Ada. Now through Saturday only. Thank you.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
It's the World Super Pipe Championships. Featuring the best half-pipe snowboarders and freeskiers in the world, it's the World Super Pipe Championships.
This Sunday night at 8 on KSBI, Family Television for Oklahoma.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce our guests.
We're introducing to you tonight an old friend and a new friend. John Coyle, across the table from me, is making his 8th appearance on The Verdict. He was on our very first show in April 2001 discussing, you looked a lot younger then, discussing should Terry Nichols be retried in Oklahoma. We're not going to talk about should Terry Nichols be retried. We know the answer is that he was retried. But we do want to talk to John, an esteemed criminal defense lawyer in Oklahoma City, as well as just being generally a good lawyer. a graduate of OCU and a recipient of a very prestigious Clarence Darrow Award for Criminal Defense Advocacy. John, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
We're always pleased to have you. On my left, Brian Hermanson, a longtime friend, but it's his first appearance on The Verdict. Brian was lead counsel for Terry Nichols in the state of Oklahoma versus Terry Nichols case. His undergraduate degree came from Carroll College in Wisconsin. His law degree came from the University of Oklahoma. He's practiced law in Oklahoma 25 years. He has had many awards and given many talks about trial practice and practice in the criminal defense area. He is engaged in both civil and criminal defense work in Ponca City. Brian, thanks for driving down from Ponca City to join us.
It's my pleasure to join you all.
Our topic today is representing the unpopular client, and I know I hear it from time to time in my practice. Why does anybody do it? Why would anybody ever do it? And I want to call up a graphic now first, an excerpt from the Oklahoma Bar Association Rules of Professional Conduct. All lawyers have a responsibility to assist in providing pro bono publico service, meaning public service. An individual lawyer fulfills this responsibility by accepting a fair share of unpopular matters of indigent or unpopular clients. A lawyer may also be subject to appointment by a court to serve unpopular clients or persons unable to afford legal services. So I guess, John, starting with you, lawyers have an obligation to represent the unpopular.
Well, they sure do, and particularly those of us who practice criminal law. It's really important to be available to the courts if they need to appoint you to do something. We routinely, in my office, take several appointments every year to represent people who are indigent.
Brian, you're involved in this from time to time. How do the other lawyers in Ponca City view this obligation to represent unpopular clients? Do they all share it?
I think so. I think most lawyers agree that someone charged with a crime seldom is popular. And while certain cases are certainly much more unpopular than others, most lawyers accept the responsibility of making sure a person's rights are protected and are willing to do what's necessary. Now, some lawyers don't practice criminal law. They're probate lawyers or real estate lawyers or contract lawyers, but certainly those that practice criminal defense take this very seriously.
John, why is this important? Why does the American Bar Association put this out? Why is it such a standard of our legal practice in the United States?
Oh, it's one of the most important safeguards that we have, because that guarantees that people who don't have money can get the very best lawyers. And that's what happened for the most part in Terry Nichols' case and in Tim McVeigh's case. They had incredible lawyers in those cases when they went to trial and got every opportunity. People that we charge with crimes, we also have the responsibility to provide them with a defense, because ultimately we pay for their prosecution too. And it's important that we give them every opportunity to defend themselves.
Is the United States unique in this belief? Is the Western civilization, do you or does anyone else know? I mean, I know we believe in it. How universal is it?
Well, I think there are other countries throughout the world. I think in Great Britain and France and some other countries, they do grant people a defense. And if they don't have any money, they'll have someone there to help them. But it's not to the extent it is in this country. But the United States is one of the only countries left in the world that has the death penalty.
Brian, let me follow up on that a little bit. We know that there are people that serve in the capacity as public defender. They are employees of the county or the state or the city or whatever the entity might be. Why do we need to appoint outside counsel instead of just always using the public defender?
Well, because the public defenders in Oklahoma and across the country are incredibly overworked. They have a huge caseload that they must handle, and many of the cases that John or I would be appointed to are cases that require a significant amount of time, which the public defenders can't take on in addition to all the other cases they have to handle. And so that's one reason. Also, public defenders sometimes have conflicts, just like lawyers do, where they have 3 defendants being charged and they can only represent one of those defendants. And so the office has to look outside for lawyers to represent those persons with the conflicts.
Well, John, do you view white-collar crime differently from, a bank robber or something like that? I assume you've defended both.
Oh, sure.
What are the differences between the two from your standpoint?
Well, I don't think there's a lot of difference. One of the principal differences will be in some murder cases is that your client will be in jail so that you have to go see him instead of him coming to see you. But in terms of the crime or representing someone, there might be more paperwork in a white-collar case. But it's not really different. Same things apply, same rules.
Brian, let's, without getting into any details of the Terry Nichols case, of course you were lead counsel for Terry Nichols, discuss the appointment process that brought you into that, and just generally how did it work, how did it affect your activities?
Well, I received back in December of '97, I received a call from the Oklahoma Indigent Defense System asking whether or not I would consider representing Terry. After visiting with my wife, I told them I would. Over a period of the next about year and a half, we had discussions and entered into a contract. Then the tornadoes hit in Oklahoma City in May of 1999. The legislature took back the funding to fund that OIDS defense because OIDS didn't have enough money in their budget.
OIDS is Oklahoma Indigent Defense System.
Correct.
Okay.
Because OIDS no longer had enough money to go forward with that, they recused or withdrew from the representation, and then Judge Murphy, who was the assigned judge at the time, reappointed me and my team to represent Terry.
Did you have any idea the phone call was coming? Did it take you by surprise?
No, it was a couple days after Christmas. The federal trial was still going on. Terry was convicted, I think, on December 23rd of '97. My phone call came around the 29th of December that same year. So they were still in the penalty phase, but it was pretty obvious, I believe statements were made that a trial was going to happen in Oklahoma because he was convicted of lesser crimes in the federal system. There was pretty clear he wasn't going to get the death penalty. And they began, and no, it was completely out of the blue.
John, I know you were involved briefly in the Tim McVeigh case. Tell us about that.
Well, I was appointed by Judge David Russell for a period of about 30 days after
represent
April
McVeigh.
19th to represent Tim McVeigh, and met with him many times and represented him at the preliminary hearing that was held at the penitentiary, the federal penitentiary at El Reno at the time, and then throughout that planning his defense at the outset. But I, of course, knew someone who had been killed in the bombing.
And you withdrew.
And so I asked the judge to, if I could withdraw.
Keeping in mind this is a family broadcasting network, what was your first thought or reaction or words when you received the phone call from David Russell?
Well, it was really pretty exhilarating, and I was honored. Of course, you're always, whenever anyone comes and asks you to be the lawyer to defend someone, you're honored by that, whether it's someone that comes in your office or a judge that calls you or whoever it is. It's a significant honor to defend someone's freedom. And so I remember I went out to Tinker that night with Susan Otto, who's a federal defender. She and I went out there, and it was...
and visited McVeigh?
Yes, and visited McVeigh, and that was when that was his first court kind of appearance in a big building out of Tinker, and it was the first night he was flown, I think, from Perry. He was in jail in Perry and flown from there to Tinker. Susan and I went out there that night and met with him and undertook his defense.
Let me jump in here and get us to a break. John Coyle, Brian Hermanson, visiting with Kent Myers and me about defending the unpopular client. You're watching The Verdict, and we'll be right back.
Notice is hereby given. Ada Nissan is overstocked with new 2005 Nissans. This inventory must be eliminated immediately. The marketing firm of Hamlin, Novel, and Reeves will conduct an inventory elimination event. Over $1.2 million in pre-owned cars, trucks, and vans will be sold off. Special elimination prices will be in effect. No negotiation necessary. This elimination event will be held at Ada Nissan, located at 420 Lonnie Abbott in Ada, now through Saturday only. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bella Shaw, and as a former CNN news anchor, I can tell you I am always interested in new scientific breakthroughs, especially about weight loss. Well, listen to this breakthrough about a weight loss supplement called propylene. In this new double-blind placebo study conducted by doctors from Georgetown University and the University of Texas, the study concluded that participants achieved amazing weight loss results without having to change anything in their lives.
You don't change your life. All you do is take a pill, and the fat just comes off.
It definitely works by itself, because I know I didn't do anything different, and I took it and I lost weight.
It works. And I don't know how, but it does.
The study concluded that taking this supplement, propylene, as prescribed, will cause a reduction of body fat and weight without any change in lifestyle.
It was just very easy. You just take these pills about 20 minutes before you eat, and the pounds just fell off.
Trust me. Try it, eat the same way, do what you're doing, and this pill will work.
Propylene is so powerful that people in this study lost weight over the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. You don't have to change anything in your life. Just take propylene and you will lose weight. With over 2 million bottles sold, propylene is one of the most successful weight loss products available. Propylene is now available direct over the phone without a prescription.
Call now to try propylene risk-free for 30 days for only $29.95. If you don't see amazing weight loss results, send it back and we'll refund your $29.95. But wait, it gets better. Call now and we'll include a second bottle absolutely free. Call in the next 10 minutes and your shipping and handling is also free. That's right. Call now and your second bottle and shipping is free. That's an additional $40 value. Yours free when you call right now.
Call 1-800-635-2224.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're visiting with Brian Hermanson and John Coyle, and the topic of tonight's show is defending the unpopular client. Kent, where to now?
Brian, I want to go first to you and then ask John to chime in as he'd like. Representing somebody as unpopular as Terry Nichols or the like, not focusing necessarily on Terry Nichols, but it must come at a high cost to you and to your family. Share with our viewers what kind of obligation you assume and what kind of impact that representation had.
Well, when you represent any criminal, someone charged with a crime, you have an obligation to represent him fully and give him your best effort. Sometimes that means at the cost of your family. And in representing Terry, we were working long hours. We'd start our first meeting each day at 6 and would work until late in the evening. I tend to be a very hands-on father, and so as far as my family is concerned, they lost me for several years, except for the very late hours at night and a little bit on the weekends, but not much. And then, of course, with the trial being moved to McAllister for 6 months, I lived in a completely different town than my family, at 3 hours away from home, and it was difficult on the family. Plus, this case had the unusual twist of not getting paid for about 14 months when there were fights over monies, which also created some additional hardships, which my family had to deal with. But when you take on a case, you take it on full and until you're relieved by the court to go full bore. And so you have to swallow hard and keep going.
Well, do you ever get any threats to your family or to yourself? And do you worry about those?
I have had threats both against myself and against my family in other cases, not in this case. And you worry about those. You worry about the people that don't call, because people that call probably aren't going to do something. It's the people that don't call that causes you some concerns. And when I received the phone call and asked to do this, we talked to all the principals of my kids' schools, and we did extra security to account for those type of threats and fears. But fortunately, I think most people understand what the role of the lawyer is, and that didn't hold that against me personally.
John, what are your thoughts about that same subject?
Oh, I agree very much with Brian. People understand your role in society. They might not always like it or agree with it, but they understand it and they're sympathetic to it. But when I was appointed to represent Tim McVeigh and involved in that, it was right immediately in the days following the bombing. And emotions were very high. And it was a very difficult time for everybody in Oklahoma City.
Were you personally affected by the bombing? Did you know someone who was in the Murrah building?
Yes, I knew several people who died in the bombing, and that's ultimately why I had to get out. I just knew too many people to be involved in the defense of someone who was accused of killing them.
Were you downtown that morning?
And yes, I was downtown. I was in the county courthouse when the bombing occurred, and all the windows shattered on the north side of the courthouse there, which faced the bombing site. So, and then I went up the hill and saw the aftermath and the devastation and some of the things. So I was right there that day on April 19th.
And you got your first call from Dave Russell, how long after that?
Friday, it was Friday in the afternoon when I was asked to, when they had Tim McVeigh in custody, and then they flew him. I didn't see him in Perry. They flew him to Tinker, and that's where I went and met with him the first time.
You've got your son practicing with you, I know.
Yes,
and,
sir.
A fine young man. And were you ever concerned about his safety in any, not necessarily Tim McVeigh case, but any high-profile criminal defendant case?
Well, of course, I was concerned about the safety of all my family.
Yeah.
Because you're always thinking about them first. I never really thought much about my own safety. I was concerned most for them, that someone, because emotions were so high at that point in time, and I was really the only target out there. Everyone else was gone or away, and at that point, no one really knew the scope of who was involved or what was involved, the extent of the evil.
So he had been arrested and was in Perry at the time you got the call?
Yes.
Okay.
And then they flew him, and as soon as I got the call, he was in the air to come to Tinker, so we went right to Tinker.
Now, we've discussed the personal effects of taking on the unpopular client. What about the professional impact? Do you find you get more business, less business? What's the impact on your?
I find my law practice is based really on if you treat people honestly and defend them to the best of your capability, you're going to get law business. That's really it hadn't affected it much. I lost a lot of money by giving up the bombing and by giving up the defense of Tim McVeigh. It cost millions of dollars to give it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the right thing to do, and as I knew people who had died, and Tim McVeigh deserved someone to represent him who didn't have those sort of reservations about it. It was too serious a charge and too serious an obligation.
Brian, your thoughts on the professional aspect of dealing with the servicing the unpopular client?
Well, you worry how it will affect you in the courtroom later on, whether people will come to a jury with predispositions about you because of you representing someone unpopular. You like to think that is a worry you just have. When the case ended, I had to start my practice all over again because I'd been out of practice for quite a number of years, just representing Terry on a full-time basis. And I found that getting back, it's been slow getting back into the saddle and trying to build a practice back up. I had talked to Stephen Jones after he finished his representation in the federal case, and he said it took him about 2 years to get his practice to where it was. I'm hoping that's not true, but I think John is right, though. People want lawyers that are going to be aggressive and ethical and ethical. I mean, they want ethical lawyers because they want to be treated ethically and want their lawyers to act appropriately. And I think anytime you roll up your sleeves and represent someone the way it should be, I think that reflects well on your practice and well on who you are.
Let me ask both of you a question in the brief time we have available for a real short answer. The layman asks, how can a lawyer represent a client they know is guilty? I'm not talking about Terry Nichols or anybody in particular. How can you do it?
Well, first of all, I don't know that we make that determination of guilt or innocence. Guilt or innocence is something for the jury to decide. Secondly, throughout the history of the United States, people have stepped up and represented unpopular clients. Going back to John Adams representing the British soldiers from the Boston Massacre on through up to that. Most of us saw Atticus Finch on TV in the movie representing an unpopular Tom Robinson. We don't need to make a judgment. We're there to protect them. And who needs good representation more than an unpopular person facing a serious crime? This is what we as criminal defense lawyers must do.
John?
I think it's the most important part of our practice is that we don't judge people. If you're judgmental, you ought not be a criminal defense lawyer. They don't go together. And so we look at people and defend them according to what, to us, is our sacred obligation to defend people. And it's unless there's a conflict like something outside in the bombing where someone died that we knew, something like that, there really is no crime that we won't take on and help with.
And we'll have to make that the final word. John Coyle, Brian Hermanson, we appreciate so much you guys coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
Notice is hereby given. Ada Nissan is overstocked with new 2005 Nissans. This inventory must be eliminated immediately. The marketing firm of Hamlin, Novel, and Reeves will conduct an inventory elimination event. Over $1.2 million in pre-owned cars, trucks, and vans will be sold off. Special elimination prices